Somewhere deep inside a secured facility in Fort Worth, Texas, behind layers of biometric locks, surveillance cameras, and armed checkpoints, engineers were building what they believed would be the most advanced weapon in human history. A machine so complex, so lethal, so ahead of its time that it would make every other fighter jet on the planet look like a toy. They called it the F-35 Lightning II, and the United States government had poured over $600 billion into its creation, making it the most expensive weapons program ever undertaken by any nation in any era in all of recorded history. They thought it was untouchable. They were wrong. Because while those engineers were hunched over their screens in Texas, while classified documents were being passed through encrypted servers, while America convinced itself that its secrets were safe, on the other side of the world, in a nondescript office building on the outskirts of Shanghai, a group of men sitting in front of glowing monitors were reading every single one of those documents, page by page, blueprint by blueprint. They knew the jet's radar system. They knew its stealth coding. They knew the precise dimensions of its exhaust nozzle. They knew things that only a handful of people on Earth were supposed to know. This is not a movie. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is one of the most devastating intelligence failures in American history, and most people have never heard the full story. To understand how this happened, you have to go back further than the hack. You have to go back to the beginning. You have to understand what the F-35 actually was and why it mattered so much, and why stealing it wasn't just an act of espionage. It was an act that quietly shifted the balance of global power. The F-35 wasn't just a fighter jet. It was a philosophy, a statement. After the Cold War, after the Gulf War, after watching American air power dominate every theater of combat it entered, the Pentagon sat down and asked itself a question. What does the perfect warplane look like? Not just for today, but for the next 50 years. What kind of machine do you build when you want to ensure that no Air Force on Earth can ever challenge you again? The answer was the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, a single-seat, single-engine, multi-role stealth aircraft that could do things no plane had ever done before. It could evade radar, it could carry out airstrikes, it could engage in dogfights, it could take off from aircraft carriers and short runways, it could share battlefield data in real time with other aircraft and ground troops. It was not one plane. It was 3 variants designed to serve the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps simultaneously. A machine that was supposed to replace the aging fleets of F-16s, F-18s, and Harriers all at once and extend American air dominance into the 22nd century. Lockheed Martin was awarded the contract in 2001. The program brought together some of the most brilliant aerospace engineers and defense contractors in the world, not just from the United States, but from the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, Norway, Italy, the Netherlands, Denmark, Turkey. A coalition of allies pooling their brightest minds and deepest pockets into one vision. The F-35 was supposed to be NATO's sword, the ultimate guarantee that the West would never lose control of the sky. And it had a secret. Actually, it had thousands of secrets. Hidden inside its design were innovations that had taken decades and hundreds of billions of dollars to develop. The way its airframe was shaped to scatter radar signals, the materials layered into its skin to absorb electromagnetic energy, the software architecture that allowed its sensors to fuse data from multiple systems and present it to the pilot in a single clear picture. The engine, a Pratt & Whitney F-135, the most powerful fighter engine ever built. Every single component of this machine was classified. Every measurement, every material specification, every line of code. Protecting all of that was a security apparatus unlike anything in the commercial world.
Air-gapped networks, meaning systems physically disconnected from the internet. Need-to-know clearances, background checks that went back decades, encrypted communications, physical security at every facility involved in the program. The Pentagon and Lockheed Martin had built what they believed was a fortress around their most precious secret. What they hadn't fully reckoned with was the fact that fortresses have walls, and walls can be climbed from the inside. The breach didn't happen because a spy walked into Lockheed Martin and photographed documents with a hidden camera. It didn't happen because a disgruntled engineer sold a hard drive for cash. It happened quietly, invisibly, through a method that in the early years of the Internet age was still not fully understood or taken seriously enough by the people who were supposed to stop it. It happened through code, through networks, through the patient, methodical, brilliantly orchestrated work of hackers operating under the direct authority of the Chinese military. To understand who these people were, you need to understand Unit 61398. Unit 61398 is a division of the People's Liberation Army, China's military. It operates out of a 12-story white building on Datong Road in the Pudong district of Shanghai. From the outside, it looks like an office building. There is nothing on its facade that reveals what goes on inside. But inside, hundreds, possibly thousands of military hackers work in shifts around the clock. Their mission is simple in its statement and staggering in its scope. Penetrate the computer systems of China's adversaries, steal everything of value, and bring it home. Western cybersecurity researchers gave them a name, APT-1, Advanced Persistent Threat Number 1. The word persistent is key. These were not hackers who broke into a system, grabbed what they could, and ran. These were operatives who would spend months, sometimes years, living invisibly inside a target's network, watching, waiting, mapping out the architecture of their victims' systems, identifying which systems held the most valuable data, moving slowly, carefully, so that no alarm was ever triggered. And then, when the moment was right, extracting exactly what they came for. They were extraordinarily good at their jobs. Their standard method of entry was something called a spear phishing attack. Unlike the generic phishing emails that flood everyone's spam folders, spear phishing is targeted and personal. The hackers would research their target in detail, studying their LinkedIn profile, their professional publications, their email patterns, their colleagues. Then they would craft an email that looked completely legitimate, an email that appeared to come from a colleague or a conference organizer or a professional contact. The email would contain an attachment, a PDF, a Word document, something ordinary and unsuspicious, and hidden inside that attachment was malware. The moment the target opened it, the code would execute silently in the background. A back door would open, and Unit 61398 would be inside. Once inside, they moved with discipline. They installed tools that allowed them to monitor everything happening on the network. They captured passwords. They mapped the internal architecture. They identified the systems that held classified data and began slowly, patiently working their way toward them. All of this happened without a single alert because the best intrusions are the ones that look like normal network traffic. The F-35 program involved dozens of contractors. Lockheed Martin was the prime contractor, but beneath them was a vast ecosystem of subcontractors and suppliers, companies that manufactured individual components, companies that wrote specific software modules, companies that handled logistics and maintenance systems. Every one of those companies was connected to the program, and not every one of those companies had the same level of cybersecurity as Lockheed Martin itself. That was the crack in the fortress. The hackers didn't need to penetrate the most secure systems directly. They could find a smaller contractor, a company that supplied a specific component, that had access to a specific portion of the program's data, and use that as their entry point. a company that manufactured specialized materials, a company that handled some portion of the avionics software, a company whose employees had access to shared databases where classified technical documents were stored. This is what security professionals call a supply chain attack. You don't break through the front door of the castle, you find a delivery entrance. You compromise the person who brings the food, and through them, you get everything you need. By the time American intelligence agencies began to piece together what had happened, and we're talking about a period stretching from the mid-2000s all the way into the 2010s, the damage was already catastrophic. The hackers had extracted terabytes of data related to the F-35 program. Terabytes. We're not talking about a few stolen documents. We're talking about an archive so vast that it would have taken years to read through it all. Design schematics, radar